What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here, and today I got my boy Saitri. Say what's up.
What's up?
And we are
Been a
talking
while.
about it has. I'm glad we can talk about this, and we're cracking open the fresh case of haterade because we're talking about a topic that we're both very passionate about. That being how Kabuto fumbled the fourth grade ninja war. Now, if we this
The
kinda
biggest
came about-
selling session in history.
It's bad, man. It's bad. And so today we're gonna just be kind of looking at Kabuto's like strategies, what he could have done in the war that would have really just given him a win, and a lot of flaws with whether him, his character, like what he could have done differently to just win him the war. You know, it'd be kind of a chill back discussion. So check out Say 3, all that good stuff, and we can just get right into the discussion. Now, one of the biggest things we have to look at first is just the Edo Tensei strategy as a whole, right? Kabuto using Edo Tensei was a strong strategy in a lot of areas due to how, on top of them obviously having constantly replenishing chakra, being able to regenerate from every wound, not only really being able to be sealed, with the added bonus that, they are able to inflict like psychological damage on who they're fighting. So it's kind of like, oh, you have to fight these people you don't really want to fight. It's a good strategy, right? But when you put it in the face of a war, it falls apart in a lot of areas. It all falls on Kabuto to just control all the Edo Tensei and like kind of fight manually on certain fronts. And what this does is it inevitably leads to a lot of the Edo Tensei just being put on autopilot. There's kind of two modes for the Edo Tensei. It's kind of either like this autopilot mode where they're just going, or Kabuto just kind of manually controls them. And then, he like takes possession, their eyes white out, and then like that's when they really get active. But he has to plug his controller in and then take focus. So he's kind of managing all these battlefields, which just leads to, the best way I could describe it is this. There's kind of this scene in like part 1 when Shikamaru kind of makes a note that the Sound 4 like ninja or like the Sound ninja kind of struggle to fight together because their abilities are like too individualistic. It's kind of a similar front with the Edo Tensei. They're just like way too individualistic as fighters, or a lot of them just have such in-depth like skill sets that it makes it really hard to utilize them all to their max potential. And some don't, to give credit. Like, obviously, Zabuza doesn't require that much effort. You know what I mean? Like, realistically, he doesn't.
No, Zabuza is actually the most skillful swordsman, and Kabuto needs to have swordsmanship skills to control him, and therefore Zabuza is actually very difficult.
Yeah. Like this isn't the case for all of them, obviously, but for a good portion of them, this does matter, and it kind of leads to some problems arising. What are your thoughts on like the Edo Tensei strategy as a whole?
Yeah, like you said, he has to manually control them to get the best out of them, and even then it's not a guarantee, like we saw with Nagato and whatnot, but that's later. But he also just cannot control them all at the same time. Like, there's just no way. His attention is way too split. Like, he's getting brain damage from just having to control this many people. So I feel like he was never going to get the most out of the Edo Tensei. Why not just plop more of them into one battlefield and just systematically take down the battlefields one by one, and just have Zetsu and some lesser Edo Tensei holding off the other companies or whatnot? Yeah. But at the same time,
something I'll note too is that a lot of Kabuto's Edo Tensei and their like his ability when he's manually controlling them is a bit predicated on like his knowledge of the Edo Tensei like he's using. So if you want a possible explanation, it's like he may not have in-depth knowledge of each user's like abilities or something like that, but then it's like he knows the Rinnegan pretty well. So it's like, then he'll like use the Hell Stab and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it's all up on Kabuto. So it kind of turns into like they're just fighting Kabuto with the remote, which is a bit weaker than like these manual like shinobi who have used their skill sets obviously for longer than Kabuto has. So it's kind of like that. I would probably put it like that.
Yeah, another thing real quick is just in war, in general, the best strategies and the best armies are the ones that give their generals some leeway. Like, it's not just completely top down. And this is a little bit different because there's no chain of command. Kabuto just does everything by himself. But still, he himself cannot manage 5 separate battlefields with 5 separate situations and entirely different, like, circumstances. So it's really difficult for him to just manage all that. Instead of just having the Edo Tensei have something going on by themselves. Like, they can't plan, they can't do anything. So,
Yeah.
it's just a lot of load that Kabuto just can't really take.
And a lot
that
of
sounded weird. Don't take that out of context.
I'll say this. The Edo Tensei strategy was very strong in that obviously there was many powerful shinobi Kabuto was able to bring back. It's just that the way it was used and how the war progressed made it so he was not able to maximize all his pieces at the same time, which in turn led to a lot of Edo Tensei that probably shouldn't have been taken out, just being taken out due to them just being restricted by the autopilot. It's a good, like, again, it's a solid strategy, especially when coupled with 100,000 white Zetsu. But like, we're just more so noting that the flaws in this strategy and how it kind of becomes apparent. That kind of leads us into the next session. That kind of leads us into the next section. Unless you have any closing thoughts, anything you want to add, or you want to jump right in?
I think we can jump right in.
Yeah. Now, a big one we brought up is that, what we were mentioning, like the whole pilot point. But when you really look at the Edo Tensei Kabuto had, they were vastly underutilized. Like, it is bad, bro. There were potential combos that he could have done that were just, they were ballistic. I know one I've talked about previously and we agree on is that Datara.
He is red flag number one. Like, he's number one on the list for the most underutilized character, aside from one certain duo, which we'll talk about later again.
Yeah. No, I like, we brought up, and Kishimoto himself, like, you kind of have to give, like, you kind of have to, like, suspension of disbelief. Like, Kishimoto was aware of this. He dropped this in an interview that Datara was probably the strongest member, just to, like, in his ability, or Edo Tensei, and his ability to just use C0 over and over again. And if you really think about it, there's no reason Kabuto couldn't have done this. Like, go to different battlefields, use C4, although C4, you can maybe argue would be a bit harder to use. Obviously, if a giant Datara is walking around, probably wouldn't be as useful. But in that instance, like, a possible way I can see why he didn't do this is possibly nuking White Zetsu that he's moving into, like, battlefields with. But if that's the case, right, like, why not just hold back the White Zetsu? And I think it also comes from maybe him and Obito not being quite as coordinated, or maybe some issues potentially arising on that front. But what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, for the Zetsu part, there was a whole section of the war where they were just traveling underground, and there was no fighting going on then. So, like, just send Datara in and just destroy them. And even if the Zetsu are present on the battlefield, who cares? Just wipe out the enemy anyway. That's what the Zetsu are trying to do. They want to wipe out the enemy, or at least hold them off. So, like, why not just expedite the process, No,
I agree. And I know you brought this to my attention, but there really is a lot of crazy combos Kabuto could have done as well. He could have done Mu, Mu, like the Null Man, like nulls his chakra signature, sneaks into an enemy camp, summons Datara, and then just, like, C0. And we know Kabuto and Obito had no issues playing dirty at night with the whole White Zetsu situation. So clearly they didn't care, right? Clearly, even if you want to argue like it's night and they weren't doing that, Obito clearly didn't really want to abide by those rules anyway. What do you think? Like, I know you mentioned Mu to me a lot of some potential combos with him.
Yeah, so more potential combos with Mu. Mu, what he can do is he can nullify his presence completely to the point that even sensors can't really sense him a lot of the time. Like, sometimes it's shown that they can, but, like, when they're focusing on other things, they're definitely not going to be able to sense him. So why not just have him sneak into enemy ranks, and then into an enemy camp, for example, and just summon Hanzo and unleash a deadly cloud of poison? Why not summon Sasori and have him unleash a deadly cloud of poison? Like, they could have very easily just had Sasori sort of prep a little for the war, make some extra poison. It's even possible that maybe he could have injected poison into, like, the Zetsus. Like, there was one filler episode where this happens. So, like, imagine if you're a random shinobi in the Alliance and you cut open a Zetsu and suddenly a cloud of deadly poison that kills you in 3 days comes out. So, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't. There's so much he could have done. And, like, Itachi kind of notes, too, that, like, it's a night stalemate, but even he thinks, like, Madara has something in the works. So, it's just, like, Obito's not really playing a fair war either. Like, it's kind of like an all or nothing war for him. So him playing fair shouldn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, it really doesn't make a difference for him. So looking at like that, like, he could have done crazy combos. And I guess maybe he didn't want to, like, overwhelm, like, the White Zetsu plan was actually pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. They just kind of got hard countered via Naruto and having Mito's ability, but that was pretty good. So I will give them credit on that. But there's just a bunch of combos they could have done with the Edo Tensei that really just weren't explored or like.
Yeah. So we keep talking about crazy combos. So more crazy combos. Position Kin and Gin like a mile away from the battlefield and have them repeatedly launch Bijou bombs at the coastline.
Yep.
What are the allies gonna do? Just like Bijou bomb artillery from a mile away with Kakuzu and the Zetsus and everybody else defending them from a distance.
Yep.
And
yeah,
then...
and, yeah, go ahead. I know you have a couple. Yeah, please.
Yeah, there's a whole list here, so like... Yeah. Then another one is drop Zetsu spores everywhere to immobilize the enemy and leave them open to attacks, as well as drain their chakra. We literally see in the Kage Summit, the Zetsus can temporarily immobilize Kage aids. So random shinobi probably aren't gonna deal too well with the Zetsu spores just appearing all over the battlefield and draining their chakra. It's obviously gonna be a detriment. And then my personal favorite, have Dan, this guy, this Tsunade's boyfriend, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So her friend. What he can do...
With benefits. Yeah. I'm sorry, I had to throw that in. You set me up for it. Continue, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, so we have Dan, and what he can do is he can transfer his soul to other people's bodies and take them over. Why not just have him go infiltrate the enemy leaders' bodies and have them kill themselves? We literally see he can travel across whole entire battlefields to get to Tsunade, like his soul can travel whole entire battlefields. So why not have him travel into the enemy headquarters, take over the Raikage, and have him punch his head off, and then take over Tsunade and have her punch her head off?
Yep.
You know, it's just like, you could have easily, in one single fell swoop, just killed the 5 Kage. Like, what do they do to counter? Like, it comes out of nowhere. Like, it's like Bird Box. They just see something and kill each other. Like...
No, it goes back to like, I like the reason this is like, I agree with a lot of what you're saying is that it's very clear that in this war, it's kind of like no holds bars, right? Like there's nothing being held back. Like any tactics, like every tactic is on the table, you know, there's nothing too underhanded here. So it like realistically, you know what I mean? Like all of this is fair game. They're not playing fair to begin with. They're not running
no
this
rules
like a
in love and
conventional
war.
Exactly. So it really didn't, you know, there was a lot Kabuto could have done in in a bunch of these battlefields, and just done better. And I will say, to be fair, it's not like every Edo Tensei was underutilized. A lot of them were done pretty well, you know. Granted, like, you know, if you're gonna bring back Chio, like maybe give her some puppets or something like that. Same thing with Sasori. Don't just put them on and say go. You know, it's not.
Yeah, like they had a little bit of time before the war, so like you can just have Chio and Sasori just make some puppets. Like even if it's just basic stuff, you can still have them do something. Same with Deidara. You could have just made clay beforehand.
Yeah.
Where, like the whole point in the war is that he's low on clay all the time. So like just negate that issue.
And we're gonna talk about like why this maybe might have been the approach in a bit, but you know, again, we could just list here for like hours and hours potential combos and anything like that the Edo Tensei could have done. I feel like this is kind of segueing us into the next point we had with the two biggest. You know what? Do you have any closing thoughts on this or anything you want to add before we get on to that?
I think it's fine. Just like one last thing.
Yeah.
This is how the war should have gone.
I want to protect my friend, and I want to protect this entire world.
So next up, we have the two biggest offenses I've seen. This is bad. This is where before, right, you can kind of argue we're kind of meat munching, right? We're kind of being on Kabuto's nuts.
Even though Kabuto could have come up with all those strategies, you know, with only an hour of thinking, you know. But
yeah, like all this knowledge, you could have come up with some better strategies, right? But you know, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Itachi and Nagato. Oh my God, stated top 2 strongest Edo Tensei, right? Like his top dogs, right? These two soloing companies, they would have gone ballistic actually if Kabuto had utilized them, right?
Yeah, just
and he doesn't
like
go ahead, please.
moo and the 4 Edo Kage and whatnot. Just have them summon Nagato and Itachi to that battlefield, and they just wipe out the entire company. Then have one of the swordsmen summon them to their company, and okay, 8th Gate guy might come out, and that might pose trouble, but everybody else just dies instantly. And then you have Kakuzu summoning them into the coastline battlefield. Oops, they're dead now. And then, who else is left? I don't even know, like, another fodder unit or something, and then they die too.
Even Nagato was kind of surprised that Itachi's Genjutsu wasn't being utilized that night. Like, he was even shocked that, like, he wasn't being used to just, like, take control of enemy soldiers or potentially gain intel. Like, they're kind of confused as to what Kabuto was doing. So, not only... And Kabuto didn't do anything with them in the first day at all. Like, nothing at all. So, it's really weird. And if you're arguing, like, Itachi is carrying Nagato... Bro, he could have taken one extra Edo Tensei and just, like, carried Nagato with him. Like, you know what I'm saying? They didn't need to go
if you just cooperate with Obito a little bit, like, let's say they're 1% more trusting of each other, just have Kabuto walk up to Obito and say, yo, dude, could you lend me one of the Bijou real quick so I could juice up Nagato and have him be actually a very good pawn for the war? And then Obito, I feel like he wouldn't agree, but, you know, if they just trusted each other a little bit more... They definitely could have done that.
I agree with you because a big thing that Kabuto does, right? The reason he like kind of has Itachi and Nagato on the side is that he's essentially trying to snake Obito in the war. And Obito obviously isn't trusting of Kabuto either. That's why he just goes on the battlefield and takes Kin and Gin. And Kabuto kind of knows this, always getting desperate. And then Obito just kind of does. He's like, I'm making sure I don't lose the war. What Kabuto was trying to do was just capture Naruto and B, just so Obito couldn't have him, and just pretty much like remove his win condition for the war, which he also just didn't know that Obito did have the prerequisites to start the Ten Tails ritual, that being Nine Tails chakra and Beast tentacle. So this was already a flawed plan from the start. Like, it was never going to make a difference, right? But so yeah, it goes back to what you were saying. He's trying to snake Obito, you know, not utilizing these two strongest pawns. And if I will say this, if you brought this up as well, like, and I agree with you, like, if Itachi didn't have Kodo implanted in Naruto, this would have succeeded. In all fairness,
yeah, this is like, to be fair, he would have actually won if this happened. Well, not won, but like succeeded in what he was doing. But then he would have had Obito at his doorstep, and you know that goes down. Which it kind of turns into that, but it's like. You know, you kind of just have like a bad situation because obviously you start with number one. Itachi turns against Kabuto, right? Which is a big L. That's a big no-no, right? You already lost one of your top pawns, and then you have what Kabuto does to Nagato. Instead of letting bro cook, you know, which he wouldn't have done anything. Kabuto controls Nagato, and Nagato has not recovered from these allegations, man. What has happened during this fight has tarnished the brand of the Rinnegan because people sit here and think that this is how it would have gone. This is not how Nagato would have been performing, man. This is all Kabuto's use of the Rinnegan. And to give Kabuto credit, for a non-Rinnegan user and for someone who is planning to take it on, he is doing well with the Rinnegan. But he's just kind of like fighting. Like, he's just kind of like in the fight. He's like, oh yeah, there's that one planet, you know, that one ceiling jutsu, the one with the gravity. What? That's like the biggest jutsu. How did he forget? Another course of action he could have taken is just, okay, Itachi went rogue. Let me just de-summon Nagato real quick. Like, I'm not taking this risk, you know. Or maybe have him summon the Kage there or something to even the odds a little bit. Because, like, Nagato plus 4 Edo Kage is better odds than just Nagato by himself. Granted, that's also a bigger risk because the Kage could go down. But, like, considering how the Raikage was performing against Naruto, they would have been a big help. Like, the very least they would have done is they would have freed up Nagato to deal with Itachi one-on-one. And then, you know, that goes however you think it goes. But, like, it's still better odds than him alone versus all three of them.
No, I 100% agree. It's just I don't know what he was doing. Like, on top of just misusing these top two pieces, he just ended up like fumbling Nagato. And he regardless of him taking a 3-on-1 or like, you know, you thinking Nagato's too slow or Kabuto trying to like compensate for Nagato's immobility or something like that. It's just like at the end of the day, it still was his performance that led to Nagato getting sealed and stuff like that. You know, it's he kind of set that up. He could have definitely played it other ways, or there's other jutsu. So again, Kabuto did do well with the Rinnegan, but to say he was using it as well as its native user, outlandish, obviously.
Yeah.
So
I would also
it
say
wasn't good.
Yeah, I would also say, like, one thing that you can sort of argue for Kabuto is that he views this as, like, a game of chess, like, you send out the pawns first. But, like, in chess, you send out the rooks and the knights and the bishops whenever it's appropriate. Like, you don't just kill every pawn before you send out the big pieces. So, like, if you need a knight or a bishop early on in the game, you send them. Like, that's one of the core strategies. You free up those pieces. So, like, during the first day of the war, just send out the Kage, send out Nagato Itachi. Like, you don't hold them back for the ending of the game, you know? Like, don't hold them back for when they're surrounded from all sides by enemy units.
It feels like he only unveils like more Edo Tensei when some drop, or most of them drop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's like, instead of, and again, this goes back to like kind of the Edo Tensei being a flawed strategy, because if he also does kind of have to lock in on the Naruto and B fight, and that you can't really do that if you're fighting a war. So it's kind of like, even if he did use Itachi and Nagato, if he wanted to use the two to their utmost potential, he was going to have to lock in with either of them, right? Which again goes back to what we were saying before. Not that like Itachi free-flowing would really like not have an issue with a bunch of people, but it's more so like, again, with these, Itachi and Nagato are very in-depth fighters, pretty in-depth arsenals, pretty cracked, and their mileage can go like, they can do pretty much everything. Like, imagine Itachi just going up to every dude, hitting them with a Tsukiyomi, and just like running that across the battlefield. Like, who's stopping that? You know what I mean? So there's just nigh infinite ways this could have done. And this kind of goes into something. Do you have any closing thoughts on this Itachi and Nagato section before we slip past?
Yeah, I would say one last thing.
Yeah.
If Kabuto was just 1% more trusting of Obito and vice versa, could you imagine Nagato, Itachi, 6 Bijou, and Obito on a single battlefield plus 4 Kage?
The war is free. It's on clearance. They're getting that. They're getting it 100% off. It's no.
Yeah, like,
it's no, it's,
like could
it's
you
no
imagine? Could you imagine if Kabuto, the moment he spots Naruto and B, he's like, "Oh, Zetsu, please send a message to Obito. They're here." And then Obito teleports in with 6 Bijou.
No, it was so free. It was so free. So honestly, like, this was like, I see the vision with this plan, and it kind of worked, but at the same time, like, it just didn't work. And this almost felt like an unnecessary play by Kabuto, just for the sake of snaking Obito. Like, it did nothing to win the war. Like, this was not a play you make with these two pieces. You know what I'm saying? You do not run this risk. So,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It wasn't a good play. But a lot of this does come down to, like, Kabuto kind of thinking, like, okay, a lot of these pieces don't matter because I got Madara, you know, in the back just swinging around. And he even kind of notes this. Like, he's kind of upset when Nagato gets sealed. Like, he punches the ground. But then he's like, oh, it's okay. Like, I got my special reserve in place. And then, you know, sticks his tongue out. So that's a bad problem. That is not a good way to run the war. Like, just predicating it on one piece. And there's a couple reasons for this. There's a couple reasons for this. Number one is that it's kind of debatable if Kabuto actually would have been able to bind Madara. We don't know. We never see Kabuto really, like, try to suppress Madara's personality or anything like that. We do know, like, weaker Edo Tensei have had the ability to resist. We know of Tobirama and Hashirama at a certain strength threshold, while like buffed up by Hashirama cells, you can just flex out of Edo Tensei binding. So if you kind of look at it like that, you could kind of see something. Madara was just kind of fortunate, I guess, that Kabuto was kind of playing with Itachi and Sasuke or fighting them. So he's just able to, you know, weave the signs to release the contract between the Edo Tensei. But the fact that, like, you're like, you know that this, like, people can resist this, and you're still throwing out Madara as, like, this win con. Granted, had Madara just, like, obeyed Kabuto, yeah, he would have ran the war. But it's still, like, a crazy thing to bank on. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's crazy. It's insane to bank on, like, one piece. It's like, I guess the best way I could describe it is, like, maybe he just thought, I guess it's like a nuke almost. Like, this was the nuke that would have won the war. But, like, Dude, like, what do you think about this? Don't let me ramble, bro. Help me. Like, what do I say about this?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fun hearing you ramble. But yeah, we have, like, continuing with the chess analogy, right? Or the chess analogy. We have Kabuto sitting here with all his pieces and a queen in the back, that being Madara. And let's say the other team does not have a queen, they did not have a Madara. That doesn't mean that you just send out all your rooks and bishops and knights to get slaughtered, barely getting any pieces in return, and then expect the queen to win the entire game by herself.
Yep.
Like, that's not gonna happen. Or maybe, but, like, you have to get extremely lucky.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And Madara was, again, like, it was a good win condition, but to just not care about, like, high-level pieces like Nagato because you got Madara in the back is crazy. Like,
Yeah,
I don't necessarily...
You can still win the war with those other pieces. You don't even need Madara. Madara's the backup, the reserve if something goes terribly wrong and you actually end up like, oh, this is bad. Like, let me just resort to my trump card. But no, he doesn't even need to resort to it at any point if he just utilizes the Edo Tensei correctly. Because he wins the war with Nagato, Itachi, Deidara, and all these people alone.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I don't even necessarily have an issue with him just wanting, like, thinking Madara is going to win in the war. I have a problem with how he's playing sloppily just due to having Madara in the back. It's a horrendous approach. And, again, like, it worked to an extent, but at the same time, right, Obito could have just as easily, like, captured Naruto and be on the other battlefront. You know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't really, you know, and Madara just was playing around. Like, even Kabuto's kind of, like, you know, eager to see what he can do and, like, doesn't even know the full extent of Madara's body, which he did modify, by the way. So he even buffed Madara's body to a point where, like, again, you know, you may just not be able to control it. So kind of a bad situation on that front. There was a lot of variables left up to play, and the fact that he also just didn't make Madara go to where Naruto and B were to just, like, capture them, kind of bad.
Yeah.
Kind of bad. But that also is, like, kind of timing, because that's also when Itachi and Sasuke kind of pulled up on him.
Yeah,
so
but, like, even then, it's like, whenever he sees that he's actually getting pressed, like, whenever he's concerned, why not just summon Madara to himself then? Like, he might be wary of Madara, but at that point, why summon him at all? Like, it's just like, he has to have complete confidence that he could control him, so just, like, you know, when Itachi and Sasuke pull up, instead of boasting all the time and whatnot, you actually take a little bit of caution and summon Madara to your location, and what is Sasuke and Itachi gonna do? Like,
yeah, no, I agree. And something I want to just, because I think this, do you have any, this segues us into, like, our final little, like, mini point, but did you have any closing thoughts on, like, the Madara part, or you good?
I think it's fine.
This kind of plays into a lot of Kabuto's character during the war and how he's egotistical is putting it lightly. Bro is calling himself the, like the Sage of Six, the second coming of Sage of Six Paths, which is crazy considering he's still wearing glasses. But
he has a belly button snake. Like,
it kind of.
No, the glasses are cool.
Like,
the belly, he kept that for the cool factor, but the belly button snake, I will not forgive.
Yeah, and there is a point of this where that kind of plays into Kabuto's character. There's meant to be a level of hypocrisy to it. You know, it's kind of similar to Obito in a sense, where they're both, like, kind of hyping themselves up as, like, the second coming of the Sage of Six Paths, yet both inevitably fail, with Madara kind of succeeding them in that regard. But, like, Kabuto at this point during the war was getting high on Orochimaru's chakra. Orochimaru's chakra was, like, changing how he was fundamentally. It was, like, changing his DNA and everything. But he was going crazy. He also is, like, very confident in his snake.
He took too many drugs.
Very strong.
Don't do drugs,
crazy.
kids.
So he is.
You'll end up with a belly button snake.
The belly button snake. Why does he have it? It's so unnecessary, and I get it. For the Sound 4 abilities, it looks nasty. I don't care. It is nasty looking.
Like, I love the design, but why the snake?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I will say too, a lot of Kabuto's ego does play into a lot of these fights, and my problem with it is that there's a big trickle effect, right? Like, you see it in a lot of fights. Like, when he's using the third Raikage, I don't know if Kishimoto forgot, but if, like, you can't really, like, justify it. Like, he kind of is fighting a Naruto clone. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna have the Raikage, like, bring him back to me, like, half dead. Brother, That's not the real one. And he notes it later on to Madara. So either Kishimoto forgot or Kabuto's dumb, which is probably the first one, but Kabuto is the one who made the statement. I don't make the rules.
Yeah.
And you can even argue this is like a similar note with Nagato and stuff like that. So his ego is trickling down into the Edo Tensei. And then it comes full circle when Itachi pulls up on him and, you know, hits him with the craziest line, like, this jutsu's weakness is my existence. That was the original nah, I'd win. Before, like,
Yeah.
Gojo, like, that was the line, right? Which is crazy. I would never lose to somebody who said that to me. But, again,
No,
so
at
you
that
gotta
point,
have
like,
that.
the moment he did that, I would have been like, okay, bet, summons Madara.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't let someone hit you with a line like that and lose. So, and then obviously you see this versus his fight versus Itachi and Sasuke, which that's its own can of worms. Not gonna talk about that. Talked about that in like my EMS Sasuke video. Go check it out.
Check it out.
Selfless plug. I don't care. But yeah, it kind of trickles around. Like his ego definitely played a part in just him selling a lot of battlefronts. How he approached the war, his overconfidence in his own abilities and a bunch of his pieces, or on his like own intelligence. Like he's even just talking shit to Obito. He's like, I've surpassed Orochimaru in the second Hokage and like other ways as well. Like he's just yapping. This dude is just like talking it up. You know what I mean? And it ends up just like landing. You know, he gets tossed on his neck, gets put under a genjutsu, and it just ends up like, you know, Itachi even just helps him out. So it just kind of ends up to this weird point where like Kabuto comes across as like all hype up just due to all the yap he's throwing up in the war. And I'm not saying Sage Kabuto isn't strong or isn't cool.
Oh, he's very
I think he's
powerful.
cracked.
I love Sage Kabuto. I wish that he would have been just this absolute terrorizing threat, like this cataclysmic event that it takes like Edo Nagato, Edo Itachi, and Sasuke teaming up to actually beat him, and barely, you know. Like, I would have loved to see something like that in the war, but, you know, we got what he got.
Yeah, and it just comes across like, I don't know, like it comes across as just like oversight, ego, just like every interaction where he loses, like just because you're okay with like certain things happening because you have certain backup plans, it's like that that's not the incentive, you know what I'm saying? Like even Obito was playing the war a lot more carefully than Kabuto was, and he has his faults. Let us know if you want a kind of sequel video to that, like how Obito fumbled the war.
Oh, Obito
but,
fumbled
actually,
maybe even worse, like I'm not gonna
yeah,
lie.
there's a lot of different ways the war could have gone had Kabuto kind of taken a different approach, or had him and Obito kind of come to a better agreement. And one thing I'll also note too about Kabuto is that he signed on to an agreement with Obito, not knowing how the war was going to end. And he admits this because Obito just kind of agrees to give him Sasuke, which he doesn't care. Kabuto could have said, bro, let me get your Rinnegan. And he would have been like, all right, it doesn't matter after the Infinite Tsukuyomi's up. Like, what's he going to do? You know what I mean?
Imagine Kabuto gets Sasuke's body. He's laughing maniacally in his cave somewhere. He's about to take over the world. And then a Rinnegan just appears on his eyes. And then he just picked up by
That's
the
what
God
I'm saying.
tree.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter whatever
The
he
God
asked
tree
for. And I
scoops
guess
him up
that's
like a child and turns him into a Zetsu.
Yeah, and even he kind of notes this to Madara too. He's like, I'm aware of your plan, just not like every detail and stuff like that. And he's just like, it's like, bro, you didn't even know what the end game was. Like, you didn't even have like this idea. And again, like it's kind of put forth that Kabuto was trying to snake Obito and just come out as like the absolute victor in the war. But the way like things progressed, it just makes Kabuto's ego look crazy and just like a lot of how can I put this? A lot of L's that he takes in the war kind of coming as a subsequent result of his character. Not even his knowledge, because he's insanely knowledgeable at this point too. Insane, you know. It's just like everything was there. But again, like it just kind of worked. It kind of worked out like that. So I don't know, man. Do you have any closing thoughts on like Kabuto and how like his character kind of impacted a lot of the war?
I think to conclude the video, how do you imagine the perfect scenario? How does the war go if Kabuto plays everything perfectly?
You know, like, well, I want to hear that. Here, let me know down below, like, what you guys would have won. And, you know, there are ways to say, like, Kabuto was kind of working off, like, unfinished information. But even, like, taking that, like, 2 steps back, we still feel like he kind of could have done more with what he had, you know? So, that's our 2 cents. Let us know what you guys think down below, how you would have won the war. Check out State 3. But, yeah, we'll catch you next time.
See you next time. Bye.